We at Sidelined have a unique perspective in this. While this idea of being sidelined abruptly and just having this end of the sports season, and for some, end of the sports career, is new to the vast majority of the athletic community right now, this is not new for us. This is what we do day in, day out at Sidelined USA. We are the first of its kind 501c3 national nonprofit that is specializing in the aftercare of permanently sidelined athletes. So that's athletes who have had to leave their sport for some kind of medical reasons. That could be concussions, that could be health conditions, or it could be, injuries, either repeat injuries or like one traumatic injury. There's all kinds of reasons, even mental health. There's all kinds of reasons that an athlete can become permanently sidelined. And there's this very deep psychological impact that it has, especially for athletes who are used to fighting through, and then all of a sudden fighting through looks like a roadblock. And there's this real disconnect with, how do I still be the competitor that I am and give up on my sport or give up on my healing process or whatever it is that is keeping them away from sport. So we've been trying to create some resources for the broader context right now of this nation of sidelined athletes, this nation of sidelined coaches, this nation of sidelined, athletic trainers. What are some of the kinds of resources that we can make? So we've been doing some different things in those different spaces. Tonight is all about coaches. And really, first of all, I just want to honor you guys. This is not an easy time to be a coach and to keep your team motivated. And so this is in some ways just like acknowledging that this is hard for you. And we want to do what we can to help bring some perspective. We have this unique angle with Jackie coming in. So Jackie is a sidelined athlete herself. So she's been through some injuries that have sidelined her temporarily, but then eventually permanently. And so she understands the psychological impact, but she's also a coach. And so she understands this perspective because she's going through the same thing as you all are as coaches, trying to keep, her girls motivated. She's got a couple different teams that she's been working with. And just really trying to make sense of this all. But because of her perspective as an athlete who's gone through this kind of thing before in a different way, but very similar, she's been able to have some extra insights, and we wanted to help share those today. And she's also a mental health advocate based on her story as well. So let me kind of hide this and bring up our first question. Jackie, there's your name. I wanted to ask you to share a little bit about your sidelined story, your experience as a sidelined athlete.
So my sidelined experience began 10 years ago, my sophomore year, 2009 into 2010. We were in fall ball, and my coach decided we were going to do a conditioning drill. And we all were playing. I don't know if any of my teammates who are on right now can remember. It was like a handball game. And I had initially planted my foot in the turf. My upper body went one way, my lower body went another way. And midair, I could feel as I pushed off that my knee had dislocated. It kind of did one of these. And then I released the ball. And when I landed, I felt my knee kind of pop back into place. So I heard a pop. I definitely knew something was wrong. At that point, I didn't know that, much about ACL tears, but my trainer did inform me through the click test. If any trainers are on right now, that famous ACL click test, you can tell, kind of get a little preview if you tore it or not. And then I ended up getting an MRI, and it was official that I had blown my knee out and tore my ACL. And I know that Sidelined is very familiar with this when they're talking to athletes and athletes that are going through this and the grieving process. At the time, I did not understand how to grieve. Thanks, Meg. It was Tiger Tails. That was the name of the game. And I really went through a lot of different phases of that grieving process throughout, 5 to 10 years after that. I ended up tearing my ACL again once I had my fifth year, 4 games into my fifth year, the year that I was supposed to get back after missing my entire sophomore season. And the first injury, I definitely slipped into a depression. I didn't really know how to cope. I didn't have great coping mechanisms, and I struggled a lot mentally. I slipped into a depression. I tried bargaining with my trainer. We know that that's a phase in grieving, trying to come back a little too soon, making bets with my doctor to try and come back and run a little bit earlier, a month earlier. I had this internal, competition with myself, and I felt very alone and very lonely, which I know a lot of sideline athletes can relate to. And the peak of what I went through was actually in my comeback year. And that was my junior year. I just mentally was not all there. I didn't come back to the sport the way I really wanted to. And I had these expectations for myself that, I didn't really take it easy on myself. I put a lot of pressure on myself to come back and be at the peak that I was at when I initially got injured. And that was another sign that my grieving process and not being able to accept what happened. And it took me a very long time. And then, the thoughts of going into my senior year, that's when it just continued to decline. My mental health just continued to decline, and I tried to shove it down, and it just didn't really work. I started to isolate myself from my team. I continued to feel depressed. And then I had my first experience with suicidal thoughts, feeling like I had no way out. I didn't know who I was. I had always identified with being an athlete. And then my senior year, things started to turn around maybe a little bit. And then going into my fifth year, like I said, I tore my ACL again, and then that ended up being a career-ending injury. So by that point, I had already not processed the first injury grieving process very well. So then I went and right into the next process. And psychologically, it just was a very long journey to kind of accept what had happened. And then also not, beat up on myself for that. So without going too long-winded, I know we'll cover that in the remaining questions, but I ended up finding coaching, and that was my huge outlet. And I found more purpose in life after that, with a lot of help from my family and friends and my teammates. And, it is possible to get through it no matter how bad it gets. So I'm definitely excited to keep talking about it and keep raising awareness on it.
Yeah, that's a lot. We're finding that those suicidal thoughts are actually very common, more common than I wish was true, but relatable, because all of a sudden this, like you mentioned, that identity loss of like, who am I? And
right.
Who am I without my sport? What value do I have if I can't contribute or at least try to fight through this? So having that experience, having that background, and now, being into coaching, how has that helped shaped you and influenced you as a coach?
I definitely think I am able to connect on a different level than maybe I would have if I hadn't gone through this experience with my athletes. I feel like I am compassionate, and I can be empathetic with things that they're going through. I like to be very open-minded and know that every player is unique in the way that they approach positive and negative situations. So whether they're injured or they're going through a loss of a family member or, really anything, I really try and understand what they're going through and be patient with the fact that they are allowed to grieve. They've earned the right to grieve. They work hard. And that's, even with this whole process with the sidelined athletes, they have all earned that right. The coaches, the teachers, everyone that's involved with making sure that these kids have their outlets and have people to talk to. Everyone has the right to grieve right now. And there's no comparison where, somebody else's situation may be worse, but that doesn't minimize what you're going through. And we need to make sure that we keep harping on that. And then another thing that I really try and focus on is positive culture. Anybody, if there's any of players watching or people that I've coached with before, knows that first practice, if it's a new team, or it's the first day of fall ball, or it's the first day of summer, spring practice, or first tournament game, I remind them first and foremost, no matter what happens, no matter what the uncontrollables are with the refs, injuries, anything like that, remain supportive of each other. And that is the biggest thing that coaches can do as well. And that's something that if you as a coach and as a leader exude that, that's going to trickle down to your team. You are setting the example the same way that our parents set our examples for us, or our guardians set examples for us, or our teachers. Those people leading are going to set the tone for how they approach everything with their team. So having that positive culture, whether you win or lose, having an open mind, being able to be open with each other, encouraging, talking about really tough situations, and encouraging each other in general when we're doing really well and when we're not doing well. And that's something that I take from my experience being a sidelined athlete, and then also learning to cope. I didn't know how to cope at first, and I had to learn all of that throughout the years with my injury and then even coaching. And I found coping mechanisms through that. So I guess all of those things really put together have helped me see things a little bit better from a different perspective as a coach.
For sure. And I'll be asking you in a few minutes about your those coping mechanisms that helped you. So thanks for sharing. So now, yes, talking about the pandemic, talking about coaching, talking about, sidelining from a massive scale here, everyone's sidelined. What are some of the things that you're seeing in the athletic world as just basic observations? And by the way, comments, people who are listening in the comment sections as she's talking, feel free to chime in as well. Like, what are you seeing good and bad with sports right now, with people who are still actively coaching, particularly about people still actively coaching their teams?
So I've noticed so many different perspectives and different just opinions from coaches all the way to trainers to players. And that's normal, right? Everyone's going to approach everything very differently. Ultimately, though, what I've really noticed is a highlight on mental health awareness. And now even more so than ever, which is, I know you and I have talked about this offline, how interesting that is, because for us, it's very apparent just with our experiences, you with Cade, me with my experience, and obviously everything with Sidelined. You've talked to so many athletes, and it's in your head. You wake up every day, you think about it. And for me, that's something with mental health I work through every day. I'm very conscious of it with my athletes. And I'm just noticing in a good way that this has almost brought about more attention to mental health and really making sure and checking in that we're all okay. There's a lot of storytelling going on. There's so many athletes that have stepped up, from college athletes to pro athletes, mental health advocates, other nonprofits. And, you hear it every day. There's people that have commented on this, as far as pro athletes from Michael Phelps to Serena Williams. They've all struggled with mental health, whether it be depression, anxiety. There's pro athletes and college athletes that have suffered from borderline personality disorder, and so many different things that they've dealt with, that if you're not really experienced with it or paying attention to it, it might not be something that it's right there in your brain all the time when you're on the field. So now that we're off the field and we have this time to reflect, social media can be awful sometimes, but in this regard, I think it's been fantastic, because it's really helped raise awareness. It's really helped bring attention to making sure that athletes are okay, making sure kids are okay, parents who are home with their kids all day, who are having to help the teachers educate them. I mean, there's so many, all of us, not just athletes, are going through this right now. And that's something that, is a huge benefit, I'd like to say, that we can look at it from a good positive perspective, that there's a lot of attention to mental health in the athletic world right now. And there's a lot of people that are more on the understanding side of allowing these athletes to grieve.
Right. Very true. I mean, it's all encompassing right now. I'm thinking about the athlete experience, especially the student athlete experience. They had two worlds. They had sports and school. And that's pretty much all dedicated athletes who are, training multiple times a week. That's kind of all they have time for in many regards, right? Mm-hmm. So you take away their sport, you take away their regimen, their normal regimen, their motivation of exercising with the team. You take away going to class. For college athletes, you take away their college life and their independence, and now they're back. A lot of them are back home and dealing with, being one of the kids again, as opposed to, being in their dorm room, doing what they want to do when they want to do it. And it can just really feel like their whole world has imploded. And that really is kind of how a permanently sidelined athlete feels. They feel disconnected from their team because they're not doing the same workouts. They're not, having the same experiences. Even if they are there, they're not a part of it in the same way. So I think that's really true. There is really this heightened understanding and sense of mental health, because I think all of us, if I did a poll right now on people who are watching, I'm easily 100% of us like are struggling to some extent or have struggled since the beginning of this. Just, it's very jarring. In fact, I was reading ABC News put out an article this morning that said that the national hotline for mental health has had an 892%, I believe that's correct, increase in calls from this time this year, or over last time this year. And they're expecting it to go even further. So definitely something that is worth talking about. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that couple questions from now. In the meantime, let's just jump into a little bit about overall, apart from mental health, because we'll get there in a minute, but overall, what are some of the things that coaches can do to help their athletes during this time?
Number one thing is to provide resources. And I know we'll get on the subject specifically with the mental health resources as well, but just resources in general. I know talking about providing creative workouts and providing creative ways for the team to connect. You can see people doing, if anyone's familiar, obviously, with TikTok. I know one of my teams is doing a stick toss ball pass to each other, and they all came together and made this video, and it just occupied their time. It got their mind a little bit off of being isolated and had them feel a little bit more connected. Just little things like that. And encouraging discussion, I think, is the biggest thing. Just encouraging each other to talk about everything that's going on. Therapy, meditation options, coping mechanisms, which I will go into detail on, but those are all things that are really, really important. And then the number one thing is goal setting. It can be really tough right now, especially when you're not on the field and there's not games going on, or there's not a peak workout that you're trying to reach, with your team in a workout setting. When you're by yourself, it can be really tough. So doing a virtual, I'm seeing messages right now that we're going in and out. Can everybody hear us? Okay. Doing a virtual workout in some way with your teammate, pairing up your teammate with someone, or pairing up teammates with each other and having them compete in doing a workout. Or if you can't work out, then you compete in making some sort of a funny video where you're imitating. I had my kids imitate me at one point, and I had them do like a little skit. Not this team, but in the past, I've done that where I have a little fun with it as a coach and be a little vulnerable and just say, hey guys, here's your challenge. You have to do your best impression of me. And they laughed and they were like, oh, can we really do this? Are you sure? And, even just having stuff like that is so important to lighten the mood. And just check-ins, drive-bys. I'm seeing so many people having catches with their players in the driveway, or just simply driving by for the seniors and holding up signs saying, congratulations with senior day. That's the kind of stuff that coaches are able to be really creative that I'm seeing and that we're doing that is very, very helpful right now. So keeping athletes motivated right now is obviously the $1 million question. Not an easy task, especially when there's no promise of when we're returning to play. Even, football, all the fall sports are still, who knows what's going to happen exactly when. And
That's obviously a very terrifying thing for athletes. So, like, for example, should we be adjusting as coaches? Should coaches be adjusting the workouts and expectation levels? What are the kinds of things that we can continue to do as coaches? I'm not a coach. What kind of things can coaches do to help motivate their athletes and keep them engaged?
So if you are a young coach that's comfortable with competing with your athletes, that might be a great idea to make it even more fun. Sharing the coping skills. So if there's an athlete that is on the team or multiple athletes that have a perspective where it's been a little bit easier for them to cope, then having them voice and share that with their teammates is really important. Whether that be, hey, I go on long walks, or, in the morning and then I get my workout in, or I just tried this new recipe that's awesome for this thing for lunch, or just little things that you would normally talk about in a locker room. That kind of stuff can be exchanged with each other, between the coaches, between the players. As coaches, it's our job to encourage our players to interact with each other and make sure that they're checking in with each other, because from a perspective of a former sidelined athlete, having that connection and having those teammates that check in with you and are asking you how you're doing, your peers, and having their respect and having their understanding is so important. And sometimes from that perspective, as an athlete, not that it's not important, your coach's perspectives aren't important and your coach's opinion of you is not important. Of course it is. But at the same time, you really look for that approval from your teammates. And that's something where if you're going through something as mental health wise, or you're just really struggling with not being able to practice or be on the field, having teammates that maybe have a little bit more energy and they might be a little bit more positive, listening to you and talking to you, and coaches encouraging that is huge. That's going to create, this universal virtual bonding that's going to be incredible. And so things that I would say to do: sharing the coping skills, positive affirmation for kids, knowing that you're more than your sport, you're more than just being an athlete. The person that you are is bringing so much to this team environment. Not just you being on the field, but you just being here is so important to us. That starts with the coach and then trickles down to the players. Just straight up listening to your kids, hearing how they're feeling, letting them vent to you, letting them cry, however they need to get it out, right? Like, ask the kid to just get it out. Even you as coaches, like talking to each other, just get it out. Talk about your frustrations. I know me and my fellow former teammates that are now coaches talk about it all the time. We reach out to each other. We're like, how are you helping your kid? How are you helping your kids? And that's us just all being very mindful and compassionate, and listening to each other is definitely the best way to go. And then putting out there inspiring resources, other nonprofits, Sidelined USA, all of the resources that are helping, that you guys are doing to help, pro athletes and college athletes that have been speaking up and talking about their experiences and saying that they're struggling too. Providing those as coaches is important. And then the things not to do, definitely would steer away from minimizing or perspective preaching. I think we mentioned this earlier, just, other people have it worse, so this is why you should look at it this way. That's not the proper way to grieve. Everybody needs to fully go through that grieving process and then finally get to that acceptance phase so that they can move forward. Very similar to sidelined athletes who have been sidelined due to injury or illness or anything like that. And then getting rid of that suck it up culture. Mental toughness is so important, but just because you're having issues with your mental health doesn't mean that you're not mentally tough. And I think that's something that definitely needs to be relayed. And those are the things that need to help motivate our kids, that you are not weak for feeling this way. You have a right to feel this way. And that's going to actually help them be stronger and move forward.
For struggling athletes, like, say you've identified that you can just tell there's a certain, maybe a few of your kids who you can just tell are absolutely not buying what you're selling. They are not motivated because they're not getting that gratification of the competition that they are used to having at this time of year. what are some of the strategies you can kind of help them, maybe coping strategies that you've used in the past? Is there anything that you can suggest to do or to kind of promote within your program?
Yes. So I would say, just going down a list, I have meditation for me has been great. And I know it's been great for a lot of my players and a lot of the kids that I train. It's just been a great way to reflect and regroup and focus on your breathing. And just doing that for like 5 to 10 minutes can be such a blessing. And I usually do that in the morning. Every time I wake up, I sit and I do tapping. Which is another thing that my therapist and I have talked about, just tapping your knees and closing your eyes and breathing, doing a breathing count. Those kind of things, it seems preachy, but it is so helpful. And it really helps you just relax, especially if you're somebody that's dealing with anxiety and stress through all this. Doing that meditation is extremely helpful. Another thing, obviously exercise. I mean, for athletes, for coaches, getting out there, going on a walk, going on a jog, lifting, doing HIIT workouts, anything that you guys like to do, that's something. Exercise, do not stop doing that, because I know me as an athlete and as a sidelined athlete, even coming back from that, and I know Cade can relate to this too, it was hard for me to like be around my sport and feel like an athlete again, and kind of own up to the fact that, okay, I can't play anymore, and this kind of stinks. And when you look at it from a perspective that just getting out there and getting your body moving gives you the endorphins, it gives you that motivation, it gives you that energy, and it helps pump into your mind, this positive feeling. So exercise obviously is another point that I'm sure everyone on here knows. Talking it out. I mentioned this before, talk it out. Anything that you need to do, whether you journal it first, you have mini goals that you're doing. Like, I'm simply going to wake up this morning and I am going to go on a jog, or I'm going to wake up this morning and I'm going to read a book. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to, before I start work, I'm going to call one of my family members and chat with them. Little things that are going to help you feel better, do them, because that is going to work. I know for me personally, talking to my family, I know my people. And that's probably the next thing that I would say that I learned also in therapy was identifying your team. And those people in your team, it can be more than one person in each category, but you have your wise person, you have your protector, and you have your nurturer. And everybody's going to have different people in those categories. And if you feel like you don't have somebody in each of those categories, that's fine. There is somebody out there that's going to understand, whether it's somebody that like you, Christine, that's, helping people, helping athletes via Sidelined. There's people out there that will understand. You just have to find them and know your resources, and knowing who your team is so important. And I know exactly who my team is. And that helps me every day to know if ever I'm feeling bad or somebody else is feeling bad, I can encourage them. Hey, I'm part of your team. I'm somebody that's going to be your nurturer. I can be your wise. I can be your protector. And there's just having that mindset that you have people in your corner, and just know that even if you doubt it, is so important, because that's what's going to get you through, and that's what's going to push you. There's another thing that's really important that I actually learned in college. And there's a term for it called helper's high. And when you're somebody that feels good about helping people, that's a great thing. And sometimes that can appear, I know for me, it appeared a little selfish. It's like, oh, this is making me feel so good to help somebody, but you keep doing it because it's positive and you're helping someone. And I encourage that. When I learned that in college through the Friends of Jackie Foundation, we adopted a little girl who had brain cancer. And she was a part of the FOJ Foundation. We adopted her as our little sister. Her name's Lily, and she's still with Temple Lacrosse today. And it's a great way to give athletes that other perspective of help yourself by helping others, and giving back is always going to be good, and it's always going to be a positive thing. So as teammates and coaches, we can look at that as, even if you're feeling low, reaching out to somebody that you may also think is struggling is another way that's going to help you too. So doing that, going out of your way to help others, it is going to make you feel good in your heart. It's going to make you feel like you have a little bit more compassion. You're understanding, or at least trying to understand. And that's something that I would definitely encourage as a coping mechanism, is to just send a text saying to someone that I love you or I care about you. And that may seem overly sentimental, but if you're somebody that's really struggling right now, that's something that I really feel can help. And then lastly, just wear what you're going through as a badge of honor. Whether, you're trying to conquer the uncontrollable right now. That's the biggest quote that I can give, is none of this is anything that we can control. The only thing that we can control is trying our best every day, waking up, tackling the day, and then being there for each other. And as long as we're doing that, that's going to help us a little bit along the way. We can't guarantee that we're going to feel 100% better, but we are going to get better. That is the ultimate goal, is we are all going to get better, and we're going to do it together.
People are loving it. Lots of thumbs up, hearts. Empathy. Caitlin says, empathy for others teaches empathy for yourself. So true.
I love her.
I love, we have a lot of good tips there, and certainly a lot to work with. I think one of the best ones was doing something for somebody else as a means to kind of reset and to get your eyes on something that you can do. My grandmother, who just passed away in January and made it to 105, she actually died on her 105th birthday. She's a very competitive woman. So she probably was competing for the birthday, I'm thinking. But anyways, she would tell us all constantly to do something for somebody every day. And she did for as long as she possibly could. And I think about Grandma Gladys, because it really is true. I, at the beginning of this pandemic, wrote a few things that she had said to me, and put up my refrigerator with a picture of her. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Thank God for something every day. For the blessings, I think. Sorry, I can't read it. And then do something for somebody every day. And it really does help make a difference. Yes. So thank you for sharing those things. So we'll try to push through here, but this is really important. So what can you share with us about coaches and just keeping a pulse on mental health? We've already alluded to some things, but what else can you add about how to do that in a way that is really purposeful right now, without expecting coaches out there to become mental health experts immediately, because that's just not possible. But how can they use the professionals that I guess they can have access to, and have that relationship with the athletes, and help their athletes proceed through kind of this hard time from a mental health perspective?
Yeah, so re-emphasizing, talking about it, creating an open environment where everyone feels comfortable to express themselves, and not tolerating if you sense, coaches can sense if the environment's not great, and if there's any scenario where someone feels uncomfortable, at least as a coach, you need to be approachable so that your player can come to you and say, this is how I'm feeling, and I'm not feeling comfortable with my team right now to express this. And the coach can give them that encouragement and give them that platform to speak up and talk about it. I know I've been a part of teams that have had players on it that have been so great at verbalizing and communicating and expressing themselves. And the coaches who recognize who those kids are and maximize on that and allow those kids to express that to the rest of the team, who some of the kids may not be able to express it, that's the most successful teams that I see with the positive culture environment, is that the coaches are recognizing that, allowing those kids who are comfortable to voice it, and then more kids speak up. And that's the whole point, just creating this open environment, utilizing the brave kids that are willing to say it right away, and that helps other kids be brave and be able to speak up. Mental health is just as important as physical health. And I think now more than ever, we're realizing that. And if we hadn't realized it before, at least we've realized it now. And then also knowing that what we gain from sport absolutely shapes our character beyond it. So everything that I've gone through as a sidelined athlete, everything that my teammates who are on here and fellow coaches have gone through as athletes has shaped who we are today. And especially if you identify as an athlete, recognizing and utilizing these opportunities as growth opportunities is going to help us develop our character.
All right. So thinking forward about this pandemic, settling down at least a little bit, right? At some point here, how do you think, what can we do now to make sure that we're utilizing this time so that we're stronger coming out of this as teams? From a coaching perspective, I know that's always a good way to address adversity. So what do you think we can do as a sports community so that we come out of this stronger?
Obviously, we're all going to be very, very excited. You can still hear me, right? You're smiling at me. We're all going to be very relieved and excited when life goes back to normal, whenever that's going to be. And what is normal going to be defined as when we get back? I mean, I think this has jaded a lot of people and shaken up everybody, especially those who have lost people due to this. I mean, there's still this aftermath that people are going to have to deal with. And the athletes are part of that. Those of us who were able to keep our jobs and push through and just be stuck inside, it's still tough for us, yes. But what have we lost? And people that have lost somebody, these healthcare workers that are working like crazy right now, these teachers that don't get to see their kids every day, the kids that don't get to see their friends every day, don't get to have their sport as an outlet. That's the aftermath. That's how they are coping with this right now. That is going to trickle over to when we're all allowed to go about our day without masks on. And that's something that just having that mindfulness, having that awareness, having that common goal that when we come back, we're not going to forget. And we're going to make sure that we're learning from this and we're growing from this and we're seeing a different perspective and really understanding from a different perspective. That's something that we can really take away from this and go into approaching, the post-pandemic. And lastly, I know you and I have talked about this, but advocating specifically for programs and organizations and resources from a counseling standpoint for athletes. I know, especially at the college level. I mean, when I was in school, I probably should have been a little bit more educated myself on knowing where my resources were for counseling. I didn't go to counseling. I didn't go to counseling until after I graduated. And then I started to kind of understand my mental health a little bit more and realize what I was feeling at the time, that I didn't grieve everything properly, how to accept everything and move forward and find that meaningful way forward. So if we make an effort to highlight that and provide those resources now that everyone's paying attention to it, and like you said, you want to get bills passed, you want to get really into these decision makers, making sure that we're getting these resources. I also want to give a shout out, I'm going to end on this, to University of Michigan, because they have this program called Athletes Connected. And if you guys get a chance, check it out. They make videos, they write articles, blogs, and they have an entire center that is lifted up and dedicated to mental health awareness in athletes. And that is something that we need to expect at every level. And you don't need a ton of money to do that. I think just having enough people being aware and willing to help and realizing who those people are, that is what's going to get us to where we need to be in the athletic community, having that open dialogue and really being able to hone in on mental health awareness and changing this narrative in the sports culture of mental health having this stigma and being weak, because it is the exact opposite. We as athletes, we're resilient, and pushing through that and recognizing that you have that resilience, you've worked hard in a sport, you can get through this. And that's something that we need to really, really encourage, and even post this pandemic. So
for sure, just normalizing that emotional and psychological pain and struggle, and sometimes the need for some interventions and medical interventions, whether that be counseling or whether that be actual medications or whether that be other types of natural, alternatives, there are options, and it's completely normal to seek out all your options, just like you would do if you had a physical injury. You would get the opinions. When you got an injury, you probably ask for more than one opinion, and you want people's feedback, and you want to learn how to get better the quickest possible. I think patience obviously is something that's important on a physical as well as mental health level. So keeping in mind those types of things. But yeah, all of a sudden, I think there's a lot more empathy for athletes who go through something like this, considering that everyone understands, even though all the athletes that are sidelined right now are doing so together, which is not the case for a medically disqualified athlete. And so think about, what if it was just you? If it was just you and the rest of your team got to go on and they didn't have to experience the pandemic, and it was just you, and it would be a whole different situation. And so just this can increase empathy for that kind of an athlete as well. So hopefully, not that there's no real silver lining here, but if we do become better as people who understand the struggles that others are going through, I think there can be some real value there.
Absolutely.
By the way, Bridget is loving it. She says,
I like to call them hype people. There are hype people. They're hyping us up. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, but we all need people like that in our lives, and that could actually be its own sub point here. It's like we need to do that for each other right now. And when it's getting dicey, let's just tell each other it's getting dicey. Today's a dicey day, and encourage the other person, encourage us, and do the same for that other person as well. So any kind of additional thoughts specifically for coaches now, kind of taking the spotlight off of the athlete care and putting it on coach care, self-care. What would you say to coaches out there? Any kind of last encouragements here?
Yeah. Take it day by day, like we all are. There's going to be bad days. There's going to be good days. Your athletes are feeling it too. Luckily, like you said, we're all in this together. Don't be too hard on yourself. I know that that's something that I've always struggled with, is putting a little bit too much pressure and being like, I feel like I should be doing more. I feel like I should be helping someone, or, I hope that everyone's okay. And especially as a coach, you worry about your kids, and you worry about your fellow coaches. You worry about your family in this situation. But don't be too hard on yourself, and don't have these unrealistic expectations of what you're able to do right now. And what we're able to do is everything that we're saying on here is make the connections, as long as you're making that effort, and as long as you're being mindful and you're thinking of it, that's going to cause you to act. That's going to cause you to make sure that you are taking all the necessary steps to help somebody. And then use this time for growth. I think that is the biggest thing right now. And that kind of relates to the last thing we were talking about. Using this time to figure out how sport affects us in more ways than just being on the field. And I think that's something that we can all take with us every day. I think sports and athletics mean something different to each of us. And we each all have our own unique individual perspectives of how sports has influenced our lives. Some of us are like, hey, I just like to have fun. This is a way that I relieve stress. I get to see my friends. And then some feel like this is their identity. This is who they are. I mean, this is something that's made them feel good. It's made them feel like they are somebody. And if they don't feel like they have that right now, we need to take the next necessary steps and use our resources to make sure that we find another meaning to who we are, other than identifying as just an athlete. And just simply, like I said, helping others, if that makes you feel good, going outside and just walking around, going for a jog, exercise, mindfulness and presence with yourself, meditating, all of those things, all the things we talked about with coping. As long as us as coaches are practicing those things as well, it's going to be easier for us to share our experiences with our players and lead by example in that way.
Yeah, that's really great. And speaking of more resources, because I know, there's a lot of great information out there, but I think it's really helpful when we have kind of it all in one place. So one of the things that Jackie and I are working on is a document that our collective kind of networks, resources that we've come across to help kind of the next level. So if this interview has been interesting to you and you want to like just keep feeding that kind of inner knowledge and motivation to help continue to lead your team, because again, coronavirus isn't going away anytime soon. So we're going to be dealing with this for a while. So that's the good news. It's like you have time to feed yourself, like, and just take it in pieces when you feel motivated to do so. But we wanted to give you guys a resource that has a bunch of items collected in one place with links, so it makes it really easy. So we're going to do that. So the way to get that resource is to please message the Sidelined USA Facebook account and or Twitter or Instagram, whatever, and give me your email address, and we'll be sending that to you later this week, just so that you have more things to grow on. We're also, Jack and I are also working on this project for Mental Health Awareness Month, where we've asked the Sidelined athletes, either in the Sidelined USA network or her personal network, who have also struggled with some kind of mental health in their transition, following the grief process of losing their sport. We are going to be letting them, athlete to athlete, share what it is that they would go back and tell themselves back in those dark days when they were really struggling. So we're going to be posting those on social media. Jackie's also a graphic designer, so I'm really lucky that's why our social media promos have been so cool lately. She's going to be putting those to some graphics, and we're going to be posting those all month. So that's a really easy thing for you to share with your athletes if you want to post on Twitter or something like that, or repost or share, or just kind of share it within maybe you do something with your coaching times this month that is related to mental health, because it's May, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So making that part of your team meetings and talking about that, and you don't have to like put people on the spot, not recommended, but at the same time, sharing these athletes that are willing to come out and say, yes, I struggled, and here's what I would tell myself back then. Or, hey, what do you guys think of this quote? I saw this on Twitter. What do you guys think of this? And just having it be part of the conversation. Don't be afraid to talk about it, making assuming that people are going to wonder if you're going to like call them out on it. Like, just make it normal and just talk about it a little bit in your team meetings. I would definitely recommend that. So follow us on social media if you aren't already. Be looking out for those items, and also Facebook message Sidelined USA with your email address, and we'll get you that resource list. And there's, many more resources on Sidelined USA in general. If you want to just check it out for, kind of put a mental note, like when you have an athlete who has a career-ending injury, for example, or who ends up deciding to hang up their hat because of multiple concussions and getting them at, far lesser impact and things. When you have an athlete go through that experience, Sidelined USA is there ready for you. We do what we do for free. We fundraise so that we support our work through fundraising, so that we don't charge for anything that we do. We just want to make sure that these resources are available to all athletes, regardless of access to a sports psychologist or what have you. And we definitely recommend a lot of good things on our site. So feel free to please reach out to us if we can be of any help in any way. And certainly in the future, if you have a Sidelined athlete, and if you have a Sidelined athlete who went through that maybe a year ago, still check in with them, because we have found over and over again, it takes years and years to kind of work through this transition for certain people. For others, seem to make that turn sooner. But especially a year or two down the road, if they're still really struggling, there's no place for them to tell people that, because they feel like it's too late. And people think it's okay by now or something. So definitely check back in with athletes who who are medically disqualified, and let them know about us, because we're here to help. Jackie, you are the rock star.
You are. You're awesome.
Thank you so much for coming on tonight and sharing your wisdom. It really is cool to me how, and this is what we tell our athletes anyways, but like, this is your story. You have taken what was a really dark place in your life and a huge disappointment, and it felt probably like the end of the world. And you've taken that, and through, you know, your experience with now coaching and just kind of your life perspective, you've taken that and you've made some, like, you know, gold out of a really bad situation. So that's what we're all about. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for pushing through and for going through the hard times. Because if you didn't go through the hard stuff, even the deep, deep, dark places,
Exactly.
you wouldn't have that same, you know, you wouldn't have that same empathy, or you wouldn't understand in the same way that compassion that's needed for an athlete who's experiencing it. So,
right.
Any thoughts from you?
I just really want to thank you, because I think everything that you're doing at Sidelined is incredible. Thank you to Cade for also pushing through, and for you being his supportive mama. And I know my mom's watching right now, so I'm sure she can 100% relate to that. And my dad and my brother and my husband, I see him commenting on here. So those are my people, and I know Cade's got his people, and you are one of those people, and you have helped make all this happen. So I just really want to thank you for giving me and other people this platform just to share our stories, because I really think that is what's really going to help everybody, is just sharing those stories, getting it out there that we all go through things, and we all have a right to go through those things, and we all have our own timeline. And as long as we're compassionate about that and we're there for each other, we can get through a pandemic, we can get through anything. So.
Indeed. And like you mentioned earlier, using social media for good. So thanks for everyone being on tonight. I hope this was a highlight of your day and that you got some support that you needed. Thanks for the work that you're doing as leaders. We commend you, and be compassionate to yourself, because it's just not an easy time. And we appreciate you guys so much, and your teams appreciate you. So.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.
Sorry for the tech issues.
Yeah. Other than that, we pulled through.
But I think we adjusted, we adapted, and we, you know, practiced what we preach. So yes. Our audience is sidelined.
Yep.
Anyway.
All right.
Night, everybody.
Night, everybody. See ya. Have a good week.